TFA fam, welcome back in. Hope everybody had a good week 7, but we are on to week 8 with this show, getting you ready for what is going to be probably a pretty active waiver wire period with 2 teams on bye this week, and 2 being one the Chiefs and the other one being the Chargers. Plus, we had a lot of injuries today. Poor one out for the homie Brees Hall. It sounds like his season is done. Hate to see that. He looks so damn good so far to start the year. And so that is something we definitely don't want to see. But regardless of that, we'll talk about that when we get over to running backs. Let's start things off with the quarterback position. And we have Daniel Jones, rostered in just under 40% of leagues. They get a matchup this week. Today, he completed 19 of 30 passes for 202 yards and a touchdown. He also rushed 11 times for 107 yards. Um, and another touchdown for a good 28 fantasy points today against Jacksonville. Daniel Jones is now averaging nearly 50 rushing yards per game and over 8 rush attempts per game. And the Giants have a very favorable schedule this week against the Seahawks, who allow the 11th most fantasy points to quarterback. So Daniel Jones, if you're a Patrick Mahomes owner and you're needing a quarterback this week, Daniel Jones looks pretty good right now. And it's pretty remarkable what he's been doing considering the lack of weapons that they really have there outside of really Saquon Barkley and now Wan'Dale Robinson. But next up, we have Jameson Winston, and he is rostered in 20% of leagues. Now, this one we'll have to monitor, see if he's actually going to be able to play this week. We thought maybe he was going to be able to play last week, but that was a short week. This week, it sounds like there's a much better chance that he's able to play. If he does, he gets a very good matchup this week against the Raiders, who have the most fantasy points to quarterbacks. And it's not even really close. It's by a full 3 points per game. So really good matchup. And if it's not, I think you could either go to Andy Dalton too if you're really in a pinch. He actually played halfway decent this past week as well, threw over 300 yards and a couple touchdowns. So, but if Jameson starts this week, he's somebody that I really have a lot of interest in. Next up, we have Jared Goff, which makes it really hard to stomach, but he's rostered in 58% of leagues. But he was absolutely dreadful today. Completed 21 of 26 for 228 yards and turned the ball over 4 times against the Cowboys. He does get a better matchup this week against Miami, who has yielded the 4th most fantasy points to quarterback so far to start the year. We'll have to see the status of also with Amon-Ra St. Brown, who suffered a concussion today very early in that game, but this offense just did not look very good. Hopefully DeAndre Swift can also get back for this game, which would also be a big boost for this offense. But next up, Matt Ryan, rostered in 54% of leagues, completed 33 of 44 passes for 243 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Matt Ryan is really kind of a middling QB2 against the Commanders, who have allowed the 9th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. He's just really hard to trust. He's had a couple decent games this year, then he's looked really bad in a lot of the other ones. So just really hard to trust going forward. And then I have Justin Fields on here, somebody who is really getting more and more involved in this pass or in the running game. They're starting to do a lot more design runs with him. They obviously haven't played this week. They play tomorrow against the Patriots, but Justin Fields, I think, is also an option, only roster in 34% of leagues. So those are kind of the guys that I'm looking at this week.
Let's move right on over to running backs. And Kev, you mentioned that we had a bunch of injuries today, but unfortunately for especially for running back purposes, the injuries were on teams that are kind of ugly. You mentioned the Brees Hall injury. Looks like it's going to be the Michael Carter show. Ty Johnson did start to pitch in a little bit, but Kev, I know it's your guy. I don't want to disrespect him too much, but we've seen this movie before. We kind of know how this ends. But if the Jets are going to continue to run a committee, he can at least be looked at in deeper leagues. Even when Brees Hall kind of completed his takeover of that backfield, Carter was still seeing around like 40% snap shares. So could be worse. At least, Ty Johnson could be looking at some opportunity, but some other guys to mention, Gus Edwards. The Ravens actually used a pretty even 3-back split here between Edwards, Justice Hill, and Kenyon Drake. But Edwards clearly looked the best out of the group. I imagine he starts to take control of more of the work as he works his way back. Obviously, this was his first game, his first football action since training camp of last year. I didn't think he was going to see as much work as he did. But it's clear that Edwards is the preferred back moving forward. And obviously we had Dobbins put on IR. So as long as Gus Edwards can stay healthy, I think he starts to separate himself from the pack. You mentioned the Chiefs being on bye, but we need to talk about Isaiah Pacheco and Jerick McKinnon. I don't know if this was just a screw up on ESPN's part, but they were showing just 14% rostership for Pacheco, which makes no sense. I'm sure he's already rostered in 12 teams and deeper, but if he's out there, he's definitely worth a stash, even with the Chiefs being on bye week next week. I kind of thought it was going to get a little bit overblown with Pacheco, getting the start today, which it was. He didn't really see a massive tick or a massive increase in opportunities, but he still needs to have a higher ownership for sure. If he is out there for some reason, pick him up. And then with on the other side of that, Jerick McKinnon still being worked in. He actually led the Kansas City backs in snaps today. Also ran the most routes with 16 compared to a combined 14 for CH and Pacheco. So again, we always want pieces of these elite offenses. That is Kansas City. So if either of those two are sitting out there, especially in deeper leagues, you need to pick them up. Someone else you can look to pick up and stash is Kyron Williams. He's still on IR as of now, and it doesn't necessarily sound like that the Rams are going to be activating him as they come out of this bye, but it doesn't sound like it's too far off. And it also sounds like he's going to get opportunities as soon as he is active. The offensive line for the Rams is gross, but we know Williams was a really good pass catcher in college, had 2 seasons with at least 35 receptions, had a 12% collegiate target share, which is 88th percentile among running backs. We also know the passing offense has not been great outside of Cooper Kupp, so maybe they look to get the backs and especially Kyron Williams more involved to help offset how poor that offensive line is. Deonta Foreman can look at him in deeper leagues, unless you were in a more active or a more sneaky league who, someone in your league already picked him up whenever the news of the Christian McCaffrey trade broke, but it's still sitting out there in a decent amount of ESPN leagues. And it looks like Chuba Hubbard suffered an ankle injury. So if he's forced to miss time, Foreman is going to be looking at a massive workload moving forward. We also saw Foreman play pretty well last year when he got the opportunity for Tennessee. Did have 3 games over 100 yards. It's not going to be pretty, but neither is the position right now. Another injury we can look at is Mike Boone. Looked like he picked up an ankle injury for the Broncos. So if you're desperate, I think you can look to Latavius Murray to pick up and stash. It's not pretty. Obviously, that offense is not good just in general. Now we're looking at the reports of Russell Wilson having a partially torn hammy, so it could potentially get worse. But with Mike Boone out of the way, it looks like it's going to be Latavius Murray and Melvin Gordon leading the way. Murray played just 9 fewer snaps than Gordon did in Week 7. Also had 11 opportunities to Gordon's 15. So who knows? Again, at least Latavius Murray is going to be getting some opportunity. Tyler Algier, if he's available, looked like he separated himself from Caleb Huntley today, playing 29 snaps to just 11 for Huntley. Saw 16 carries to a 7 combined between Caleb Huntley and Avery Williams. And then just something to note, if for some reason Alexander Madison is out there, pick him up. I was surprised to see that he was only rostered in 30% of ESPN leagues. Obviously, I'm sure that had to do with the bye weeks hitting, but worth looking at your waiver wire to see if he is available. Again, I'm sure, I don't want to hear in the comments, Alexander Madison isn't available. We get it. All right. I'm just throwing it out there in case he is. You can look at him, and then you can always look to pick up some of these handcuffs and backups, which is what we always try to tell you guys to do, to always be churning through that, that last roster spot on your team for cases like this where injuries start to pop up. You can already have them. You don't have to go out and, spend your preferred waiver wire priority or blow a bunch of fab. But, obviously looking at guys like Kenneth Gainwell, Boston Scott, Dontrell Hilliard, and even DJ Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any like priority ad and running backs. I guess maybe you have Deonta Foreman sitting out there just because there's nobody else there, and now with the Hubbard injury. But I
Yeah.
don't think there any of these guys
Gus
are guys that.
Edwards.
Yeah, but like that is such a committee, and I don't think it's really going to change. Like I think all of them are going to be involved, and it's going to be frustrating on a week to week basis. Not to mention with also with having Lamar Jackson being able to run the football. So I just think on the I just don't think there's any of these guys that I would absolutely unload my fab for. And like I have to have this guy on my roster. Is the
Right.
way that I would
Right.
feel about it right now. All right, so let's go over to wide receivers again. It's kind of a similar situation. I got a lot of guys' names on here, but that's just because a lot of people play in a lot of different leagues, and a lot of these guys may be available in some leagues and others won't be. First off, we have Paris Campbell, and We've been holding on to hope for Paris Campbell for what seems like forever, and it feels like maybe he's finally starting to break out here. He hauled in 10 passes again today on 12 targets for 70 yards and a score. It's good for 23 fantasy points. He has now received 21 targets over the last 2 games, and he's seeing a robust 27% target share in this offense. And he's now seen he's seeing a lot of targets right now, and they're using him in all these short intermediate routes type stuff with him, which is kind of surprising because of his deep speed that he does possess. But that's the way they're going to continue to use him. Then I think he's a viable option right now. Only rostered in 8% of leagues right now, and he looks like he is the number 2 wide receiver. I mean, Alec Pierce was still out there running around on 96% of dropbacks, so he is obviously still out there, but he is much more widely taken because prior to this week, he had, each of the last 2 weeks had 80 plus yards. But Paris Campbell, and not that this is a great offense, but if he's going to continue to see this sort of volume, he's definitely worth an ad. And then Wan'Dale Robinson only rostered 29% of leagues. He caught 6 passes for 50 yards on 8 targets. He also played 83% of the snaps from the slot this week. This team has a massive amount of injuries to the wide receiver room. Robinson continues to carve out a decent role in this Giants offense. He makes for a decent plug and play wide receiver 4 next week against the Seattle Seahawks. So Wan'Dale Robinson sitting out there, they're going to find a lot of creative ways to get the ball in his hands. Then I think he's somebody that you should definitely be looking for. Next up, the rest of these guys are kind of like 12 team and higher. If you're in like a 10 team or lower than that, I really wouldn't be looking at a lot of these guys. But McCole Hardman, had a really good game today. Rostered only 24% of leagues. Obviously, him and Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who are both on here, are both on bye. Both of them are rostered in less than 40% of leagues. But McCole Hardman has 3 straight weeks of scoring double-digit fantasy points. He broke out this week with 4 receptions on 4 targets for 32 yards and a score, as well as a rushing touchdown. He had 26 fantasy points this week, but he only ran a route on 45% of Mahomes dropbacks, and the Chiefs continue to find creative ways to get the ball in his hands. And so he's going to be a little bit boom or bust, I think, because he's not going to be a guy that's going to see this massive target share. They're going to do a lot of different things with him. He's going to see a lot of short routes. He's going to see a lot of jet sweeps and stuff like that, kind of like they did with him today, to get him in space. And he's super dynamic once he is in space. So I think he definitely should be rostered in more leagues than what he is, because I definitely think on certain matchups, and really their schedule really lightens up in the second half of this. They get the Titans, the Jags coming out of their bye, and then at the Chargers, which right now this Chargers defense looks dreadful. The Rams at Cincinnati, at Denver, then Houston, Seattle. Those are in the fantasy playoffs by my mind, man, and then Denver to close out the year. So or the fantasy season. So I think that this is definitely an offense we want to be attacking, but it's going to be kind of frustrating because trying to trust these guys on a week-to-week basis, because then you have Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who held in 3 catches for 111 yards on 4 targets, which was good for a 7.5% target share in this offense. He continues to be a boom or bust wide receiver 4, and like I said, with their schedule, like he's out there, he's running a lot of routes, but he's just not seeing a lot of targets right now. Juju Smith-Schuster had another monster day again today, so Marcus Valdez-Scantling, I would actually rather probably have McCole Hardman than MVS, just because of the other ways they're going to try to get the ball in the hands of McCole Hardman. So after that, we have Josh Reynolds, who really was not very good today. He only saw 2 targets, but he had a pretty solid 3 weeks prior to that, before their bye, because he had seen 8 or more targets and at least 15 fantasy points in each of those 3 games. This week, though, he did absolutely nothing. He was terrible. That whole entire offense was terrible. But Amon-Ra St. Brown is now dealing with this concussion. We'll monitor that. So if he's going to miss time, he's only rostered in 37% of league. Not a bad matchup against Miami, so Josh Reynolds would make some sense. I have Tyquan Thornton on here. I know that the Patriots haven't played yet. If he's sitting out there in any league that you have a spot where you could possibly drop somebody, I would be adding him now. I think he might be legit. I know he's at very limited sample size, what we've seen from him so far, but he seems like a guy that's an offense that really has nobody else outside of Jacoby Myers. And this is a guy that I think that is super dynamic. Is a bigger wide receiver. I think he's 6'3", but ran that super explosive 40 time coming out of college. And not a lot of people's radar, but he looked really good last week, and really looked decent the week before that as well. So I think Tyquan Thornton is somebody that I definitely want to be looking at. The rest of these guys, guys like Marquise Goodwill, we're going to have to see with DK Metcalf. It sounds like he avoided serious injury, which is a good news. I think he told everybody afterwards that he was good to go. He was fine. He could end up missing probably maybe a few weeks here, but Marquise Goodwin caught 4 or 5 targets, 6, 7 yards, 2 touchdowns today. you have to be kind of desperate to play him. But you know, if DK Metcalf misses some time, there's no really depth here on this wide receiver room whatsoever. So it's gonna be Tyler Lockett and him, and then the tight ends. So I don't know. I mean, I guess we turn back the clocks here with Marquise Goodwin, but if you want to take a shot on him, I don't mind that. And then lastly, we have guys like Nico Collins, who he did suffer a little bit of a groin injury today. We'll have to see how serious that was, but he continues to really be one of their main targets here in this offense. He did only caught 3 passes for 33 yards before he exited today. But Nico Collins is definitely a good stash to have. Zay Jones rostered 20% of leagues, a 26% target share in this offense. He saw another 10 targets today, though he only hauled in 4 of them for 54 yards. He has now seen 8 or more targets in 4 of 6 games. So he's seeing a lot of volume. It's not necessarily the best volume because 4 of 6 is not great, but obviously, or excuse me, 4 of 10 is not great. But he's going to continue to see this kind of workload. He's going to be a viable wide receiver 4 moving forward. And then Donovan Peoples-Jones, not a sexy option, but somebody you can look at during bye weeks. He has now gone for 70 yards in 3 of his last 4 games. Like I said, not really a sexy name. David Njoku also left today's game with a ankle injury, so could just open up more volume for Donovan Peoples-Jones. And then I put Van Jefferson on here because it sounds like he could be returning from injury here very, very soon. I think right after against the 49ers, he is expected to return. So he could be another viable wide receiver 4.
Let's go ahead and wrap things up with the tight end streams for week 8. Kick things off with Evan Ingram, 23 targets the past 3 weeks. He has lines of 6 for 69, 5 for 40, and 4 for 67. Gets Denver in week 8, which isn't a great matchup, but if he's going to continue seeing targets, it's definitely worth chasing. Irv Smith, speaking of not great, Irv Smith has not been great this year. I think he's only averaging just above seven PPR fantasy points per game. But going to get the Cards in week 8 who have given up the second most PPR points per game position. That includes Jawan Johnson scoring 2 TDs on Thursday night. Cade Otton, this one obviously is only if Cameron Bright is out again, but he definitely makes for a great streaming option going up against the Ravens, whose numbers look good on paper, but they've also faced Ty Conklin, Mike Gesicki, the Patriots tight ends, Dawson Knox, Hayden Hurst, and this week actually rookie Daniel Bellinger actually had 538 and a score before he was injured, left the game early. In 2 games without Bright, Cade Otton has now played 94 and 81% of the snaps, catching 10 of 12 targets for over 100 yards. Daniel Bellinger, like I was just touching on, depending on what happens with him and his injury, you can look at him. He's widely available. And then Harrison Bryant, as things currently stand right now, Harrison Bryant is the only healthy tight end for the Browns. The early reports do indicate that the injury for Njoku isn't serious, but if he does miss, next week, Pharaoh Brown was also injured in this game. Jesse James is already on IR, and the Bengals have given up the 12th most PPR points per game to the position.
Yeah, thankfully David Njoku is having a breakout year. Is not a serious injury because he was 7 for 71 today before he left. But again, like you mentioned, they said it's not serious. And I think he even tweeted out that he's good to go. So I think he did leave in crutches and a cast. Maybe he might have missed a week or 2, but thankfully it's not a long term. So, anyways, let's get to some of these questions here. Wentworth, should I trade Rondell Moore and Deonta Foreman for Patterson and Dobbs deep league?
God.
I'm gonna say no. It's just because of Cordell Patterson. Like, I just don't know what to expect from him when he does return. I
And we
think
also
this
don't know when that's going to be either.
right. And then Dobbs has been. I mean, that Packers offense is. I mean, there are some. I mean, the Packers offense is dreadful. The Buccaneers offense is just atrocious right now. I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't mind Dobbs like a long term play, but I don't know. Like Deonta Foreman, we know he's going to be the starter moving forward, and not a great offense. And I am shocked that the Panthers did what they did to them today. But if Chuba Hubbard's going to be out for a while, like, I don't mind it. I would probably just rather hold on to him.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think I would prefer to hold there. JG Wentworth.
Is Gus more of a priority or Donta? See, that's the problem because, like, on one hand, I see Gus Edwards and I see such a better offense, right? And more dynamic, more chances to score touchdowns. But that's going to be a three-way committee. Like, it was pretty much split right down the middle today. It was like 35% for Gus Edwards, like 33% for Justice Hill, and then it was like 20 something percent for Kenyon Drake. And I think that's how this offense. This is how this is going to go. It's kind of like what we saw last year with this team, right? And then I mean, let's remember J.K. Dobbins is only out for what 4 weeks, more than likely 4 to 6 weeks, something like that, as he got scar tissue cleaned up here in his knee, and so. I don't know. I just feel like Deonta, at least you might be able to get something from him. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like that three-way split was more has to do with this being Gus's first game back, right?
And
Like
it very well could
he
be. You
still
could be
still had
right.
16 carries,
Yeah, 66 yards scored. So
two
I th-
scores.
I think Gus Edwards definitely has the higher ceiling. Let me put it that way. And I think maybe Foreman maybe have maybe a little bit safer floor because Deontay Foreman did look really good last year. I mean, he looked really explosive today. I mean, he had some really nice big runs that he broke off, but yeah, he's also probably not going to be involved in the passing game either. I think that's about it. Is there anything else?
I don't think so. I think it wraps it up.
All right then. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody rocking with us. Apologies for not being there this afternoon or this morning. I was out. We had a baseball tournament. Cody had some stuff go on, but he took over in the comments, answering everybody's questions. That's not something we'll be dealing with moving forward. But we'll be back again Wednesday night for the live stream as we always do, and our weekly rankings show will be out Wednesday morning ish. So. Anyways, keep it locked in here. Hope everybody has a great week 7. We will see you here Wednesday night for another live stream. Have a great weekend. Rest of your weekend. Have a great week. Bye.